Hello again. Although I'm sure I look these days like some harmless old imp, the kind of amiable old duffer who might be seen returning his library books or feeding the ducks in the local park, there was a time when I was perhaps a little less agreeable and good-natured than I am these days. And at that time I had awkward and uneasy confrontations with police officers in various countries, including the Soviet Union, Turkey, Syria, and Israel. I do not doubt for a moment that these were mostly my own fault, but I must have done something right because I'm still alive today to tell the tale. I was prompted to think about this upon hearing that the police officer who shot dead Chris Kaba in 2022 has been acquitted of any culpability for his death. In the description to this video, I give a link to an article from the Guardian newspaper published shortly after he was shot, in which he is described as an aspiring architect and soon to be father. I cannot help but observe that claiming that this or that rogue's ambition, at least in certain communities, always seems to include his having wanted to be an architect. In this case, of course, it's complete nonsense. The young man was a gangster. He was indeed soon to be a father, but the woman pregnant with his child had obtained a restraining order to keep him away from her due to his violent behaviour. He had a conviction for threatening people with an imitation firearm, for which he had served time in prison, was connected with a conspiracy to murder, and when the police stopped him, he was driving a car which had been spotted in connection with a drive-by shooting in Brixton. Still, we should at least give him the benefit of the doubt. Surely he didn't deserve to be shot. This is where my own experiences are germane to the issue. When the car was stopped and hemmed in by police officers, some of them jumped out and announced that they were armed police, and they called upon him to show his hands and to get out of the vehicle. Instead, he drove forward in an effort to escape, crashing into a police car. It's clear that he didn't care who he injured, and so he was shot because he represented a clear threat to the police officers standing around. Here are a few tips for somebody who has been in situations where police officers have been pointing their guns in his direction. First, do exactly as you are told. Make sure that everybody can see that your hands are empty and don't make any sudden moves. It's a good idea very slowly to show that your hands are empty, like this. Don't stare into the eyes of the men with the guns. You really don't want to start that sort of game with aggressive armed men. What you're aiming at really is to lower the temperature so you can look submissively to the ground, make sure that they know that they're in charge and you are powerless. After they can see that you're not armed and dangerous, then do exactly what you are told as soon as you're told to do it. With luck, they will lose interest in you, as long as you're not actually carrying, of course. This procedure also works, by the way, with armed militias. I have had some very ludicrous jobs in my time for which I have been exceedingly ill-suited, but somehow bluffed my way into. One thinks of teaching electrical installation, about which few people know less, at a further education college, for instance. In September 1978, during the Camp David summit between Jimmy Carter, Anwar Sadat, and Menachem Begin, I somehow managed to get myself hired as a bodyguard to some Swiss guys who were smuggling luxury cars into Beirut at the height of the Lebanese civil war. I don't think they can have been firing on all cylinders, really, because I am a hopeless shot, and to cap it all, I didn't even have a gun at the time. Still, we set off from Damascus to Beirut, Found ourselves being stopped every so often by roadblocks. Man, some of the most jittery and nervous people I've seen in my life. Sometimes they were Syrian soldiers, otherwise Falangist militias, and so on. My job was to negotiate our way through them, which I did after a fashion. At least we weren't actually massacred. I used those same skills which always stood me in such good stead with the police. Show that you're unarmed, do precisely as you are told, without any rapid movements which might lead somebody to suppose you're going for a gun. If only Chris Kaba had had somebody like me, an old hand, as you might say, to explain to him how these things work, he might perhaps by now have qualified as an architect.